Hey guys, today we're going to talk about using a comma before a conjunction when we're using independent clauses. So this is on page 9 of your book, the Elements of Style workbook. So go ahead and pull that out, or you can look with me on the screen here. So we're going to talk about a clause. We've talked about this in class last week, but a clause is a group of words that's going to have a subject and a verb. Remember, I drew it up on the board, and you have two types. The first one is the independent clause, and then you have the dependent clause, also known as the subordinate clause. So it goes by both names, dependent and subordinate. Okay, an independent clause can stand alone and be a complete sentence, and then a dependent clause, however, can't stand alone, or it creates a fragment. So it has to be joined to an independent clause in order to form a complete sentence. Okay? And if you have your book, it would be great to go ahead and underline some of those key facts about what makes an independent clause and what makes a dependent or subordinate clause. Okay? So this sentence down here below, we've put two independent clauses together with a comma and a conjunction. Now, a lot of times people forget this comma, and that's one of the things we're trying to work on, is making sure that every time we use a conjunction to put together one of these, it's a compound sentence where we have an independent clause on either side, that we use the comma with it. Okay? So here we have, Susan loves her trips to the mountains, comma, but, our conjunction, she does not get to go often. Okay? So if we're looking here, and go ahead and mark your subjects and verbs in this sentence with me. You should underline loves twice because it is our verb. And then who or what loves? Okay, hopefully you said Susan. That's our subject. She'll need to go ahead and underline that once. Okay? And then if we go over here, you should see that our verb is does get. Now, to go is an infinitive, but it's not the verb of our sentence. Okay? So go ahead and underline does get is our verb. Notice that not is between those two, but not is a negative word and not part of the verb. So does and get is our verb. Now, who does not get to go often? Okay, hopefully you said she. That's our subject, so we're going to underline that once. Okay? So, and you notice we could put each one of those. Susan loves her trips to the mountains could be a sentence. She does not get to go often could be a sentence. So those are two independent clauses. Go ahead and label both of those with an I because they are independent. Okay? And then you'll notice that she puts them together with the conjunction and the comma here. Okay? If I put it together with a conjunction, this would still be a run-on. If I put it together with just the comma but no conjunction, it would be what we call a comma splice. I would put together two independent clauses with just a comma, and that is not enough. I need both. Okay? All right, clauses can be joined with a conjunction that shows the relationship between the ideas contained in the two clauses, such as augmentation. That would be something where we use like and. Contrast, but would be a good one there. Or cause and effect. So we have this happens, so this happens. Okay? Coordinating conjunctions always come between the two independent clauses and are preceded by a comma. Here is the list of the coordinating conjunctions, and they do spell out fanboys. If you look at the first letters, F-A-N, fan, and then B-O-Y-S, fanboys. And that's how you can remember the coordinating conjunctions. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. Okay, those are the coordinating conjunctions. So if we're going to use those between two independent clauses, we need to use a comma as well so that we don't have a run-on sentence. Right? All right. Subordinating conjunctions had the dependent clause. So go ahead and underline subordinating conjunctions and dependent clause. And travel with that dependent clause in a sentence placement with a mandatory comma following the dependent clause. When the dependent clause begins the sentence. That's very key. You're going to use a comma when the dependent clause is at the beginning of the sentence. The sentences below are composed of one dependent and one independent and punctuated properly in both instances. Okay? Now, you'll notice these are the same. This is the same use of clauses here. They're the same clauses. We've just flipped the order. If you look here, that even though it often rains while she's there, and here it's even though it often rains while she's there, that's our dependent clause. And we're going to talk about whether or not we use commas in just a second. Okay, so let's underline our subjects and verbs though before we get started. We have Susan loves her trips to the mountains even though it often rains while she's there. Okay, we have several verbs here. You should have loves underlined twice as a verb, rains underlined twice as a verb, and it's kind of tricky, but that's there because it's technically is. Okay, that should be underlined twice because it's a verb. Now, who loves their trips to the mountains? Susan, so underline that once, it's your subject. What rains? It, that's your subject there. And then what is there? Your subject is the she part, okay? Now, we have these subordinate conjunctions, even though and while are subordinate conjunctions here. So go ahead and circle those, and you can write an SUB above them because they are subordinate conjunctions, okay? And then the same thing is true for this sentence. You have it as your subject here, rains as your verb, she is your subject, the as your verb there, Susan's your subject, and loves as the verb there. Okay. Now, notice that our dependent clause, even though it often rains while she's there, it's the same in both. Okay. So if you want to go ahead and label both of those with a D for the dependent clause. And then Susan loves her trips to the mountains. That's your independent clause. You're going to label it in both cases with an I because it's an independent clause. Okay. Now, notice the punctuation difference that we have here. When the subordinating conjunction dependent clauses are at the beginning of the sentence, I have a comma. But when they are at the end, there's no comma. So that's the key difference of the punctuation there. If you're putting the dependent or subordinate clause at the beginning, it does have a comma. When it's the end, there is no comma. Okay. Here we have a list of the subordinating conjunctions. Got to move my book up a little bit there. Because, since, so, for, notice for can be a subordinate conjunction as well. Although, if, since, unless, then, though, as, after, before, when, while, where, since. So these are a list of subordinate conjunctions. It is not all of them. There are others, but they've put some of the key ones here for you. Okay. Okay. Now, if I'm going to use a coordinate conjunction like up here, that's when I have a compound sentence. So this sentence that we had up here about Susan loving her trips to the mountains, but she doesn't go often, that's a compound sentence because I have two independent clauses there. When I use the subordinating conjunction like we did in these, those are what we call a complex sentence because there's one independent and one dependent clause. Okay, so we have some examples on this page of both. Okay, and there's really, both are really good types of sentences. It's important to mix up your sentence types, and so it's good to write different types of sentences. Excuse me, I had to sneeze. Okay, if we go ahead and turn to the next page, page 10 in your book, okay, they've got your subjects and verbs underlined for you here, and you can see that this sentence is joined by a comma in the coordinating conjunction and so this is a compound sentence because I have two, and I'm going to go ahead and label them each with an I, two independent clauses put together with the conjunction. Okay. You could change this compound sentence to make it sound a little bit better into a complex sentence, which might be better. Sometimes we just have to look at the sentence and see which one works better for the idea that I'm trying to convey, okay? And so we have here, as the early records of the city have disappeared, the story of its first years can no longer be reconstructed. That is a complex sentence because I have here the subordinate clause, okay? So I really haven't changed a whole lot other than to take out the conjunction and put a dependent clause here. The subjects and verbs are still the same, but I've made this a complex sentence because it sounds better. I've made one idea less important. Here's another example. Because the early records of the city have disappeared, comma, the story of its first years can no longer be reconstructed. Same idea. I took out the conjunction, I made it a subordinate, and it just creates a different sound. It makes one idea more important and one idea less important, okay? I've made one point that I want to be dominant. I put that in the independent clause. And then what I want to be less important or that pops out less, I've put in the subordinate or dependent clause. And you as the writer get to choose that, okay? All right. Let's look at this compound sentence. The situation is perilous, but there is still one chance of escape. So here you have your verb is, underline that twice. Situation is your subject, underline that once. Is my verb, and then my subject is chance. There and here aren't usually subjects, so we always need to look for something else, but chance is my subject. Okay, this is a compound sentence. I have two independent clauses put together with a comma and a conjunction. Okay, so I could rewrite that sentence so that I'm not giving equal weight to both clauses, but instead I'm making one more noticeable. Okay, here I still have the same subjects and verbs, but I've used a subordinate conjunction, although taken the conjunction out here, and that makes the chance of escape, that's what I'm wanting to emphasize in this sentence. So it gives more emphasis to a specific part. Okay? You might also choose to make a subordinate clause a phrase. Okay? And so, owing to the disappearance of the early records of the city, notice that there is no subject in that. It's a verb and then some prepositional phrases. I have turned this into a phrase instead of a clause. And you might choose to do that. Okay, here's another example. In this perilous situation, I changed a clause, either independent or dependent, to a phrase in this perilous situation, to a prepositional phrase. Okay, and so you can do something like that to add variety to your sentence. The main thing is that we're not writing sentences all the same. Okay, that's really the key. All right, let's go ahead and look at the next page in the book, page 11. And you should, can you see that good? Sorry, I'm going to move it around a little bit. Okay, we're going to combine the following pairs of sentences in two ways. First, using a coordinating conjunction, and second, using a subordinating conjunction. So we're going to write each sentence two ways. This is on page 11 of your book. Okay, they're determined to have their own way, and they know they will suffer for their willfulness. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and put, if you want to look back at the list of coordinating conjunctions and choose one that you think sounds really good. Okay, I think they're determined to have their own way, but they know they will suffer for their willfulness. That sounds like a good one to me. So if you're going to use that, make sure you put they're determined to have their own way, comma, but they know they will suffer for their willfulness. Don't forget to use the comma. Don't forget to make your they lowercase and to put a period at the end. Okay, and then with the subordinate conjunction, I mean, really, you just have to look at the list and decide one. I think although would be good. They are determined to have their own way, although they know they will suffer for their willfulness. In that case, you wouldn't put a comma because I'm putting the although at the end. And again, there are multiple ways that you can do this. I'm just giving you one way. Okay? All right, there are four combos that you need to create on that sentence. If you have questions, let me know. Be sure to email me. And then I also want you to go ahead and